Hey everyone, welcome back to TLB Station. In today's video, we'll be diving deep into one of the most powerful and creative properties in CSS, the transform property. Whether you're building a website or just playing with cool animations, understanding transform is essential. So let's break it down value by value and see how it works with some practical examples. First up, the rotate function. This rotates an element around its center by a specified angle. A positive angle will make it turn clockwise, and a negative angle will turn it counterclockwise. Also, there's a rotatex function that rotates the element around the x-axis, which gives it a 3D rotation effect, making it appear as if it's flipping forward or backward. There's also a rotate y function that rotates the element around the y-axis, like this. You can also use the two functions together for a better look of the 3D effect. And you can go even further with rotate z function, which rotates the element around the z-axis. This is particularly useful when working in 3D environments, where you need more precise control over each axis. It will work only in 3D environments. There's also the rotate 3D function, which gives you even more control by letting you rotate an element in 3D space around a custom axis. With rotate 3D, you can define the x, y, and z axes, as well as the angle of rotation. Here's an overview of all of them. Next up is the scale function. It allows you to resize an element by increasing or decreasing both its width and height. It can take two values, the first one for scaling along the x-axis, and the second for the y-axis. If you provide just one value, it scales the element uniformly. There is also scale x for horizontal scaling and scale y for vertical scaling. There's also a scale 3D function, which allows you to scale an element in 3D space by adjusting the x, y, and z axes independently. However, since we're not in a true 3D space, the z-axis doesn't have much of an effect on its own. So you'll mostly see changes along the x and y axes, similar to the regular scale function. Here's an overview of all of them. Next up is the translate function. This function moves an element from its original position along the x and y axes. If it takes one value, it will move the element along the x-axis by that value, while the y-axis will default to 0. If it takes two values, the first one moves the element along the x-axis, and the second moves it along the y-axis. Additionally, you can also use translate x and translate y to achieve the same effects with dedicated functions. There's also the translate 3D function, which allows you to move an element in 3D space. However, since we're not working in a 3D environment, it will function similarly to the normal translate function, and the z value won't have a noticeable effect. Here's an overview of all of them. Next up is the skew function. It tilts an element along the x and y axes, distorting it like it's being pulled diagonally. If it takes one value, it will skew the element along the x-axis by that amount, and the y-axis will remain unaffected. But if it takes two values, the first one will skew the element along the x-axis, and the second will skew it along the y-axis. There's also the skew x function, which allows you to skew an element only along the x-axis. This creates a horizontal slant without affecting the y-axis. There's also the skew y function, which skews an element along the y-axis, while leaving the x-axis unchanged. Here's an overview of all of them. And finally, we have the matrix function. This is the most complex of all the transform functions, as it combines multiple transformations into a single one. The matrix function takes 6 values that allow you to perform a combination of scaling, rotating, skewing, and translating all in one go. It's better to combine the functions using more intuitive transformations like scale, rotate, translate x, and translate y instead of using matrix. The matrix and function can be difficult to understand and maintain because it requires manually calculating all the values. Before we wrap up, let's highlight a significant update in CSS. While we've discussed how to use functions like rotate, scale, translate, and skew with the transform property, there's now an even more straightforward way to apply these transformations. With the newer CSS syntax, you can now use properties like scale, translate, and rotate directly, simplifying how you apply transformations. And that wraps up our dive into the transform property in CSS. We've covered everything from rotating, scaling, translating, and skewing elements to how the powerful but complex matrix function works. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more web development videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.